Digital filmmaking. I hope you are doing really well. I know this is a different way of doing school than we're all probably used to. Um, but I wanted to get this information out to you as fast as possible. So please excuse my dramatic lighting um, and my hushed tone. I have a daughter sleeping next door, so I do not wish to wake her. But I did want to get this lecture out as fast as possible so that you guys can see it. Welcome again. I hope you are staying rested and staying healthy, and this next 2 weeks aren't really stressing you out too much. All right, on with what we got to do. The plot graph. So we are writing our scripts for our movies, and the requirement is that these movies be a complete story. No to be continued at the end. You kind of want a problem. So some of us know what a complete story makes, and some of us don't. So I'm giving you the basic story making 101 lecture. There are a lot of theories, as our guest speakers have talked about, like different ways to kind of structure your plot and how to arrange your movie. There's a whole bunch of different methods and theories out there. This is the basic one. It's so basic. But about 90% of movies that you see in theaters could probably fit into this structure. And that's going to be your first little discussion topic, is explaining how one of these movies that you have watched falls into this plot structure. So listen up, because I'm going to want you to use these terms. All right. So your teachers have probably shown you this graph. And don't worry, I'll move my face out of the way. But this is good for me right now, right? So you've seen this graph with your English teachers. It's a plot graph. You probably know that that's called the climax. You probably know that this is called something and this is called something. I'm going to go over all those terms right now and talk about how they apply to movies and hopefully give you some examples. So with this plot graph, we break it up into 3 acts. So this is a 3-act structure, and it's kind of divided up like that. Act 1 really kicks off the action, and then like I said, we know this is called the climax, but usually Act 3 starts right as the climax is getting on. This line, depending on which professor you talk to and which year, might be in a slightly different spot, but it's generally in that area. And some of the video examples I'll also be providing shift this zone a little bit, but it's more for just kind of a reference than for it to be an exact. It's really a guideline. It's not really a rule. So first we have, at the very beginning, we have the setup. And so in film, we have something called the hook, right? And the hook is that opening scene that doesn't really matter towards the plot, but it kind of gets us excited to watch the movie, and they call that the hook. Sometimes it's before we even see the credits, and then we spend a long time setting up the world. We introduce the characters, we get a feel for the environment that everyone's living in, and if there's any sort of weird thing happening in this universe, we kind of get introduced to that quickly, so it doesn't surprise us when we get invested into everything else. You probably know that this whole slope is called the rising action. Sometimes in graphs, this first half is flat rather than sloping, but for the sake of simplicity of making a graphic real quick, I just did a ramped up line. And then we have the falling action, which is what happens after the climax. And there's often some confusing of what climax versus falling action is. We'll talk all about it. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the conflict. I've said it several times. The conflict gets introduced right at the end of Act 1. And if you're writing your screenplay, that should be around page 2 or 3. We should understand that there is a problem in this movie, and a character needs to solve that problem. So a conflict is, if you need the definition, is a problem that needs to be solved or addressed in this movie, okay? So I'll give examples in a little bit, but typically at around page 2, page 3, we need to understand that there's an issue the character needs to deal with and how he's going to deal with that maybe. All right, then we transition to Act 2, fade to black, fade back in, and now it's a new day, and we are marching ever so fastly to the climax. And if we want to give a page reference, depending on how long your script is, Act 2, or the end of Act 2, the climax, should be somewhere about 2/3 into your script, maybe 3/4 into your script. Act 2 generally is the longest. I've seen it where the falling action takes 2 minutes, and I've seen it where the falling action takes 45 minutes. So this spot right here is definitely fluid in a movie, but typically the climax is where let me just move that out of the way, the moment the problem gets solved or addressed. And I'm talking about how it's being addressed, and the reason why I'm using that phrasing is because sometimes a problem doesn't get solved. Sometimes the character's trying to save the day and doesn't, right? Think Endgame, think not Endgame, yeah, or Infinity War, and other movies. There are times when the day doesn't get saved by the hero, and the hero has to figure out how to live with himself, right? I'll give those in classic. I have classic examples set up for you guys right at the end, so you'll hopefully that paints a better picture. All right. After the climax, or on our way to the climax, this rising action here, I want you to, this is where movies really get made, is we can go from, there's a problem, oh, I can fix it, but what really tells the story and what tells what really makes the movie happen is complications. Complications are speed bumps that make it harder to resolve this problem, okay? So, again, I'll give, oops, that was the wrong slide, but that's okay. It makes it harder to resolve the conflict, all right? And these could be, usually there's at least 3, but maybe there's 12. There could be a lot of things in there. I keep going back to Endgame, but there was a lot of problems that involved time travel, and they had to go rescue 6 other stones, and each one of those is a complication. And then complications lead to more complications. And then there's also this talk of, you might, in some of these videos, you might hear something about like subplots and other side stories. But really what you need to focus on, especially because our film is so short and it's nice and focused, don't get too wrapped up in that. Really try to march the character towards resolving that issue, but hurdles get thrown at him, okay? All right, this got a little bit mixed up, but that's okay. And then we have the resolution, okay? The resolution is the result from this problem being solved, okay? And sometimes these complications lead to further complications that also need to get wrapped up. So the falling action is dealing with everything else, okay? So the climax is where the moment we know that the character has solved it or has dealt with or has addressed or has accepted the problem, and the falling action is the result of that and how the character deals with that. If you're unsure what I'm going to say next, or if you're unsure about this whole thing, I think it becomes much clearer with the pictures. So, Act 1 hooks the audience in and it introduces our whole topic and characters. Act number 2 dramatically increases the struggle to solve the problem. And Act 3 addresses all the issues that stem from the solution or the fallout from all the complications as well. Whew, deep breaths. All right, that was a lot of information in 8 minutes. So let's look at an example. You don't need to see the word example. There we go. Let me just move myself over here. All right. So let's talk about that typical. This is very close to the plot of Speed, if you've watched Speed with Keanu Reeves, or every single Bruce Willis movie ever. It's basically this plot structure. So we introduce ourselves to Detective Dan. Detective Dan, the hook would be like some random chase scene, and he's like, "Oh, I got the guy, boo!" And everyone cheers, "Yay, Detective Dan!" Right? And we just see how cool he is as a cop. And then we learn like the city's really corrupt, and there's a corrupt police department, but he's the good guy that saves the world, and he's just going about his business being this awesome police officer in the middle of this bad city. And then news breaks. There's a bomb in the city. Some villain or some bad guy says, "Oh, there's a bomb in the city, and it's going to blow up and kill lots of people." Right? So that's Detective Dan. And now he's got to deal with that, right? And so everything we learn is in, boom, now we're in Act 2. Okay, so learn about the city, learn about Detective Dan, and then the problem gets introduced. Here's the problem you got to deal with, right? And then all that we're going to learn here is that, like, as we get closer and closer to the bomb getting diffused, right? So the climax will be diffusing that bomb, either cutting the red wire or unplugging the timer or stopping the timer or throwing it up in the sky as it explodes, saving everything. That's the climax, okay? That's going to be the climax. But if Dan just knows where the bomb is and diffuses it, that's a boring movie. So we got to throw some more stuff in his way to kind of make it harder for him to do that, right? So the bomb's on a timer, right? And it's hidden in the hockey stadium. right? So now there's more people involved. He's in a public space, so he can't just run around going willy-nilly. And then also, it's on a timer. If you're ever trying to build more suspense in your movie, put a timer somewhere. Like make a countdown clock happen for it, or put a limit on how many tries they get, or something like that. Complication 2, his wife or his girlfriend or his pet is handcuffed to the bomb, making now it's a personal stake involved with it, right? And because his wife, and now complications also lead to complications, right? So because his wife or girlfriend or pet is handcuffed to the bomb, he loses his badge. You're taking this too personal. You're off the case, right? You can't handle this. Blah 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 blah. Right? So now he doesn't have the authority of being a police officer, but he's got to save his pet or his girlfriend or his wife or whatever's personal stake now is involved with it. And complication 4, it turns out the bad guy, big twist, the bad guy is a police sergeant or his former partner, right? All right, and then he discovers that right before he's about to defuse the bomb, or it's like there's some clue involved in that bomb. And he's like, "Oh my goodness, I know." Sorry. So then, boom, he saves the day, defuses the bomb. But now we're into Act 3. There's a lot left over from our build-up that he still needs to kind of deal with, right? The bad guy runs off with the wife, girlfriend, pet, and he's like, "Hey, I got you. I'm still gonna get away." Blah, blah, blah. Like, so he's got to catch the bad guy. He's got to save his wife, girlfriend, or pet, right? And he's got to redeem himself, right? So then another chase ensues. He captures the bad guy. He saves the day with his family, and then like the mayor comes along and goes like, "We were wrong about you all along, Detective Dan. Here you go. Here's your badge back." And yippee, he's back and reinstated, right? So that's your basic action movie, right? Another one, just to give you a different example, totally different lens, the rom-com example, right? So we got Steve. Steve's not the most socially graceful teenager. He's got his quirks, but he's charming. He's Steve, right? And we're going to introduce this world. This high school's full of jocks. There you go, your stereotypical 80s movie, right? And Stephanie's the number one cheerleader. Woohoo, right? And Steve wants to take Stephanie to the prom, right? We know where this is going, okay? And now, but Stephanie is dating Chad. Right, Chad's the team captain. I'm not sure what team, but he's a team captain. Got a Letterman jacket. He's Chad. Stephanie likes him, right? And so this whole build-up is going to be Steve marching towards should I, shouldn't I? I'm going to. I really want to, but should I? I don't know. And then the climax again is going to be Steve doing some sort of promposal at lunch, right? Some complications, right? Steve's got no money, so he's got to, do all sorts of odd jobs. He's got to get an Uber, and he's got to do this, he's got to do that, and those jobs it could lead to like hilarious antics. So he's doing all that to get more money to do the promposal and get the prom ticket and get the limousine and get all that stuff, right? Someone's parents say no, either Steve's or Stephanie's, or someone's parents say no. Oh yeah, and Steve's also getting help from Betty. Betty's his friend. She's the quiet art student, and she's like doing her thing, but she's also helping Steve because she's friends with Steve, right? And then right before he's about to do the promposal, like he gets rejected for the dance contract, or he forgets the dance contract, or now he can't even go to the dance. But then he says, "Screw it, I'm going to do the promposal anyway." And while he does the promposal, and then Stephanie says, so the climax is him asking. Right? He's resolved and he's done it. He's gotten to that point. And then Stephanie says, no. So this is what I was meaning about the problem being addressed. So Steve is not going to prom with Stephanie. Right? And he has to address that and live with himself. I know. It's heartbreaking. Right? And Chad... at the dance, somehow Steve still makes it to the dance, and Chad chases him through the dance, right? So this is him dealing with him he goes to prom by himself, because he already bought the ticket, he already did everything, so he's at prom. Chad's like, "Steve, stay away from my girl," and starts running away from her, right? And then Stephanie sees how horrible Chad is, like, "Oh my God, Chad, you're horrible," right? And then so Stephanie goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, will you have this dance with me?" And this whole time, like, Steve finally realizes, Betty should have been his date, and Betty and Steve are really in love, and everyone's happy at the end. Yay! Right? So these are just two examples. If you want to read my daughter's example, I worked through this with my daughter. It's about a fox. I'm not going to walk you through it because I'm going to say goodbye in a second. So, but that is basically the 3-act structure. Okay. So with that in mind, you are going to discuss this, and you are going to. This is my kitten. This kid's name is Sparkle Mom. She was sleeping, and now I woke her up. She's not happy. But you are going to do this with an outline and a movie of your choosing. So in the discussion, you're going to talk about a movie, and you're going to talk about how it fits every little point I just talked about. Many movies do it. You just got to think about it for a little bit. And then hopefully we got a cool movie list to check out while we're on this 3-week hiatus. And then she doesn't want to be here. And then you're going to do your outline for your screenplay, and then that outline should get applied to writing your screenplay. And we'll talk more. But I hope everyone's doing well. Say goodbye, Sparkle Mom. Goodbye. I was trying to get her to meow.